Welcome in and welcome back, everybody, to the Trust the Board podcast. Joey Bray and Ryan Parrish with you, as always. Day number 2 in Mobile, Alabama, here for Senior Bowl practice. Ryan, how was your day? Your big takeaway from today? What was it?
Well, episode 4, glad to be here. Uh, Much better rested today. We had some moments where we
Yes.
were starting to still kind of hit up against a wall, but honestly, we are much rejuvenated compared to yesterday. We got to get up bright and early, go to media day. We got some cool interviews in that follow either of us on Twitter, which I recommend you do. We'll shout those out at the end again, just to have you follow all the content we're putting out. But uh, got to have some cool interviews today, and honestly, I just thought it was a good day of high energy from at least one side of the ball across both practices. Uh, I would say maybe the offensive side of the ball is still continuing to struggle. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. Offenses are sort of intricate. And like, while both sides of the ball require chemistry, I think offense requires even more chemistry than, just because we're doing these drills where it's a lot of one-on-one situations. Even the 11-11, it's like you kind of have a pretty basic thing that you're trying to execute on defense. So you don't necessarily need to have as much chemistry on defense. So the offense is naturally at disadvantage. However, I do think it's a more talented side of ball for the most part at this Senior Bowl, and I think that's kind of the main takeaway for the day was like, especially that morning practice. We heard a lot of rah rah from the defense. We'll say that.
Yeah, I thought that's kind of what I was alluding to, is that the defense definitely dominated today. But before we get too much further into what actually happened on the field, Ryan, you got to try Cookout. I need the honest review. The people were asking for it in the comments. We talked about it a couple episodes ago. Guys, I'll be honest. I don't think he liked it. I thought it was phenomenal as always, but I'm a big Cookout guy. I'm definitely biased. But Ryan, he didn't really say anything about it. I low key, I don't know. I'm worried. I don't think he liked it, guys.
I mean, it's kind of different. Like the thing is, yesterday we went out to a like Cookout is clearly fast food, which nothing against fast food. We all get down with fast food from time to time. Uh, and honestly, I actually had a pretty positive thought. It's just that yesterday I was yapping so much about the restaurants that we did go to that were sit down that have these finely cooked, which is a nice Italian restaurant. And when you get truly fine dining, you got to give it some love in real time. Whereas Cookout, don't take me wrong, it was not terrible. I would certainly rank it above a lot of fast food options that I have in my area. But that said, it wasn't gourmet by any. It was just, it was bang for your buck. It was a pretty relatively cheap. The burger was fine. I would say not a lot of condiments, which is kind of a huge thing for me, is you need to have some sauces, especially if you're going to be eating something that's got a lot of fried foods. You need primo sauces to really just kind of perk those fried foods up. And I would say that if there was one place the cookout was lacking, it was the sauce department.
You know what? That's completely fair. That's a good honest review. I'm not like an insane sauce guy, so I love Cookout. Been loving Cookout, but you're right. I
We'll
can't
go
think of the
again.
name of the burger place. I don't tempt me with a good time. I mean,
Maybe
you
not
can get
this
a
trip,
whole
but
thing of food, a big old milkshake for $10. I think mine was $10 even.
milkshake was very good. I will say the milkshake was very good.
Hey, that's what you go for, the bang for the buck. But we'll actually talk about what happened on the field. We alluded to it a little bit. The defense stole the show, particularly for the national team in the first practice of the day that started at 1:30. This was all defense. It wasn't even close. None of these quarterbacks could do anything. None of the offense couldn't really do anything. It was hard to pick out a guy in the national practice, at least offensively, that really stood out. But I can't, I'm not going to like blame those guys, not going to get down on those guys, because I really think the defensive talent in the national team is it's unbelievable. Talk about a couple of those guys if you want. I have some names that I'm definitely going to point out, but I think we're going to have a lot of the same ones.
Yeah, and I mean, some of it's going to be repeats from yesterday. That's just kind of the nature of it. Offensively, before we really dive into the defense, I will say there are guys who show flashes, and hopefully I'm not confusing which practices some of these guys were in. But as far as quarterbacks go, Still not very impressive. I would argue Sawyer Robinson had a worse day than he did yesterday. Um, and I would say that for the early window, I'm not overly impressed by him. I still think he's a day three guy, but it's like, steady Eddie-ish of the group was Cole Payton. He's not he wasn't like I think he still lacks velocity. I just still don't think he has NFL velocity. But in terms of like at least getting the ball accurately to where his receivers were, he was above the other two. Um, but yeah, defense really won the day, especially those Texas Tech guys. And I think you're chomping at the bit to talk about a couple.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those Texas Tech guys, they stole the show. I think Jacob Rodriguez has been the best player here in Mobile all week. I think he's the worst kept secret of the entire draft process. I came into this week of Mobile saying, like, I think Jacob Rodriguez, given his body of work this year at Texas Tech, should probably be going a lot higher in mock drafts than he, was. I don't feel like that's anybody's thoughts on Jacob Rodriguez anymore. I think with another good day and another like actual Senior Bowl, the actual game on Saturday, there's no reason why this guy shouldn't be a first round pick, in my opinion. This is a top 20 talent in this class. I've told Ryan this. I keep saying it. I'm going to keep saying it. This guy is unbelievable. He forced a fumble in 11 on 11 drills today, caught an interception a couple plays prior to forcing that fumble. He was everywhere. He was wrecking havoc all over the field. He had another amazing performance yesterday, but he somehow topped it today. Jacob Rodriguez, he's been the guy. Whenever you try to talk to him at media day, the line to get to Jacob Rodriguez was unbelievable. You couldn't get anywhere near the guy. He's been the star of the show in Mobile for me. I think he's played himself into being a legitimate first round pick. I wouldn't even bat an eye if somebody took him night one. I don't know how the rest of the NFL feels about him. I'd love to hear what some scouts have to say about him, some people like that. But he stole the show for me personally. And Lee Hunter, the defensive lineman for Texas Tech, he had another phenomenal day too. We talked about in these 11 on 11 drills, the defense dominated. Lee Hunter was in the backfield pretty much every single play. When him and Jacob Rodriguez were on the field at the same time, it didn't even feel fair, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know that there's an offensive lineman here that could have blocked Lee Hunter one-on-one today. And that's no disrespect to any of those guys, but he's been playing on a different level. Those two Texas Tech defenders have risen their stock so much just in these last 2 days here in Mobile. And that's why these practices are so important. That's why, coming to the Senior Bowl and playing is so important for these guys like Rodriguez and Hunter, who were a part of a really good defense in Texas Tech, went a really long way in the college football playoff, won the Big 12, and their draft stock is still kind of They come here to Mobile. Their stock has risen. They're going to participate in the combine, I'm almost certain, and their stock's only going to rise. That's why this pre-draft process is so important for guys like them, and they showed out.
Yeah, I think, when we were talking about it, I think Lee Hunter was pretty much, I mean, I've been hearing guys talk around, you hear a lot of conversations as you're kind of up in the stands walking around. And Lee Hunter's a guy who I think is pretty much your favorite favorite scouts, favorite player. Like he's going to be a top 32 guy, I'm almost certain. For a guy that plays a position, like he's probably a nose tackle and at the next level. And that's not necessarily something we're used to being talked about as a top 32 player, but he certainly fits the bill. I heard one person say today, he doesn't win pretty, but he wins. There's a rep where, again, they're not truly tackling yet. There are a couple times where some guys hit the ground because they got kind of bumped hard. We weren't truly tackling, but there were plenty of plays today where Diego Pavia would have been sacked if we were allowed to have tackles. And Lee Hunter was right in the middle of it. As far as Jacob Rodriguez, you're not exaggerating. Like, I think, I was seeing him mocks. If you do any of the mock draft simulators, in some of them, you were able to get him in the third, and some of them you were able to get him in the second. I think that is, at least the third round is like far out of the question now. I do think the first round debate is going to be interesting because I think one, he does truly have the respect where it would not shock me if he did go in the first round. However, I am just curious to see how that all shakes out because again, in recent years, we threw a conniption about, Jack Campbell, who was the best linebacker of his class, getting drafted at 19. And so there's two guys for sure at linebacker that are probably getting drafted, both the Ohio State guys. I would be shocked unless they have some sort of injury history that pops up. or some other off the field stuff. I'm not saying they do. I'm just saying this is the type of thing that would make them fall if they were to fall, because the talent for those two guys is apparent. The physical traits are that apparent. That's why Jacob Rodriguez, I think, was a little slept on coming into this process, because no way there's three linebackers in 2026, you know, coming into the first round. That's why I think Jacob Rodriguez was a little slept on. But it was like, it wasn't like he was a secret coming in here. Everybody was excited to see him. And so to see him then perform on the field is just kind of only increased his stock. Like you said, I wouldn't be shocked if he snuck into the first round. If not, he's an early round 2 guy, I think. Uh, Also, we're Steelers guys. We always kind of relate things back to the Steelers. And I got to say, we ran into him today at Media Day. We got to get much closer to him at Media Day than we did on the field after practice, because after practices, he's basically enclosed in a circle, a throng, if you will, of people. Media Day, he kind of snuck in. I don't think people realized he was there at first. So we were able to get up pretty close. And for as violent as he is on the field and as frantic and like hair on fire as he is on the field, surprisingly soft spoken. Like, to the point that when I first walked up, I was maybe like 5 feet away from him. And I don't think my mic, I still have to get to that video. I don't think my mic was able to pick up his initial talking points until some guys moved out of the way and I was able to get a little closer. Very soft spoken. So I found that to be interesting. But just beyond the Texas Tech guys, they're not the only linebackers that showed out. I know you're going to talk about one of your guys in a little bit, but before we get to him, a guy that I wanted to bring up yesterday, and I don't think we really fit in, that showed up yet again today, Bryce Betcher of Oregon. He's a guy that has a dual football and baseball background. He has, I think his stock was maybe day 3 coming into this process, but I think he's kind of shown throughout the week. He's another guy that's just always around the ball. He got into the backfield for some tackle for losses. Again, if we were tackling today, he's been solid in coverage. He's a guy that I think deserves a shout. Another guy I think that deserves a shout, we talked to him earlier, is Keyshawn Elliott, Arizona State. Another guy who's just always around the ball. Like, he's not necessarily like a track star out there, which is the guys that tend to like get people's attention when we're talking linebackers. But there's something to be said for those guys who are, you need him to follow a tight end downfield, he's in his hip pocket. You need him to defend against the run, guess what? He's up there. Hey, you need him to drop back in hook zone and then he comes up on the route that's running underneath, he's there. So, it's just a heavy, heavy linebacker class. We've been saying it, we keep saying it, and they just keep showing up at these practices.
Yeah. And, you just said I was going to talk about one of my guys, Kyle Lewis, the Pitt linebacker. I don't know if you saw, because we kind of parted ways. You went to see the defensive lineman get in some work. I wanted to see, some one-on-ones towards the end of the national practice. Kyle Lewis actually kind of moved around and covered everybody today. He started with the linebackers covering running backs. Then he kind of went over with the corners and safeties, and he was getting reps against wide receivers and tight ends. And it was something that I was looking forward to seeing. And he did well. It's not like he, gave up any big catches or anything like that. Had a couple of nice breakups, was running stride for stride with these wide receivers. That's what I like about him. The versatility. I don't know how high Kyle Lewis is going to go in this draft. If I had to guess, he's probably like a late day 2, day 3 guy, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think his stock should be a little bit higher than that. I think he possesses this kind of ability that I don't know that you get with a lot of players. I really think he can cover just about anybody on the field. He's a guy you can kind of plug and play. I mean, the thing that comes to mind is, like, if he goes to a system like, I don't know, look at what Seattle did this year with Nick Emenwari. I'm not saying he's going to go to Seattle and get that kind of role, but if he gets that kind of role in the NFL, I think he's a guy that, Nick Emenwari is someone he could kind of, model his game after. Nick Emenwari is obviously a completely different build, much taller, has longer arms than Kyle Lewis as well. But I think Kyle Lewis, that's who his game kind of reminds me of, just off these 2 games here, or these 2 days here in Mobile. And it was really cool to get a chance to finally talk to him and be like, why are you so good in coverage? Like, why is it that you take such pride in covering literally everybody on the field? And his exact quote to me was, that's what I like. I like one-on-ones. I like me against you, and I like to better myself. Loved that quote. He wants the one-on-one opportunities. So for him to be getting them and getting them against receivers, tight ends, anybody you could ever want here in Mobile, he's been one of my biggest risers and one of probably my favorite player to watch this week.
Yeah, the more I've watched him, the more I honestly he's got that build that makes you think maybe you experiment with the safety role a bit. I don't think he can play nickel, so I think that's a little out of the question. But I think honestly, I watch him and he's just a short, weak side linebacker, and like we have 5'11" guys in the league, so I don't think he needs to put on a ton of weight. But if you have him play weak side, he can take on some tight ends. He can get in the backfield because I think that's the other thing that's underrated is I don't think he's much as a pass rusher just yet. I don't think he's like going up against offensive tackles and winning in that way. But he just like against the run, he can play. He got in the backfield several times today. He was one of the more animated guys out there. He got like he got the coaches yelling on several occasions, like not yelling like at him, but yelling for him. They were like very joyous this morning on the defense. And he was a guy along with Jacob Rodriguez who was just everybody was cheering for. And it was because they kept showing up, they kept making plays. And I think he's a guy who maybe came into this weekend or this week, uh, and you think maybe he's a round 5, 6 guy, maybe something along those lines. I think round 4 is probably his floor now. We'll see, 4 or 5. Um, I think just because of the size, you know, it's one of those things where I think people will continue to hold that against him. But if he gets a shot somewhere in the NFL, it would not shock me if we're all going, why did we overthink this?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So a couple other guys that I liked defensively, I'll just mention them really quick, and then I'm sure Ryan, you have a couple more guys. Malik Muhammad from Texas, kind of an undersized corner, but he's been really, really good. He's had some really solid reps against a lot of these American defenders in the American team. They have, those taller receivers we talked about, Ted Hurst, Jacoby Lane, Malachi Fields. They're all on that American team. So for Malik Muhammad, who is known as being undersized, to be able to stick with all of these guys, I think he's putting together a really, really nice week here in Mobile. And Bud Clark, the safety from TCU, he had a really good day as well, had an unbelievable interception late in practice for the national team. He's an interesting guy to watch. There are a lot of good safeties, a lot of corners. It's a really heavy defensive draft. We knew this coming into this, but I mean, they dominated the practices today.
Yeah, no doubt. Muhammad, he's a guy where I think what impressed me today is, coming into the week with his size. When you say undersized, I mean he's not 6 foot, and I don't know if he weighed in at 200 pounds or not. That's something I think we'd want to check on. But you're thinking nickel guy, which again, you can be that size and play nickel, and that's fine. But what was impressive today was he was going against those guys who had clear height on him, like a Malachi Fields, who when he was lining up, he wasn't lining up in the slot. He was lining up outside. He was out wide and he was making plays, breaking up passes. Again, with a little grain of salt, yes, spotty quarterback play. I will say that they had the American team's quarterbacks, uh, I would say are much, much further ahead than the national quarterbacks. Not saying they're great, but the at least the talent level seems to be far and away higher on that team than on the national team. But again, shout out to excuse me, shout out to Muhammad. He was making some plays on the outside. One of the guys that I want to shout out also playing on the outside, Davison Igbinosun from Ohio State. I think he's been feisty all weekend on the outside. He's your classic press corner. He's it for tying everything back to the Steelers again. You know, Joey Porter, he's in that mold. He doesn't have necessarily the length of arms that Joey Porter has, but the idea of like, oh, he's a little bit grabby, going to have to watch that the next level. I haven't seen that really be a problem here this week. He's been pretty good about keeping himself clean. And, I think when you get a man press corner, there's just a little bit of the occasional grab that you're just gonna have to live with. That just comes with the territory. And I think a lot of times when we're in this draft process, we're kind of overblowing, even just once they're in the NFL and just, because like, last year everyone was saying Joey Porter, oh, he's so grabby, he's just penalized all the time. And then you look at it by the end of the year and it's like, what he had like 4 or 5 holding penalties all year, and they just happened so that, they kind of clustered in a couple of games. It's just I think he's been really good this week. But I think the D line was one of the huge stories of the day. They were just phenomenal. Caleb Banks, He was kind of getting into things yesterday, just kind of warming back in. He was a dominating presence today. Zion Yun, he continues to run guys over. He's run a guy over multiple times each day. He's been fun to watch. Um, who else do I got here that's on the D line? I think those were the main guys that jumped out to me today. But uh, there's another guy. Fun moment today. We were watching Trench play today. At least I was. The guy at ASU we were talking about. I'm probably still messing his name up, but Iheanacore. He's the Arizona State guy. Still kind of a developing prospect as a tackle. I think he's only been playing for about 4 years, but he's got massive. I think he measured in it like he was 34 inch plus. I want to say he was close to 35-inch arms. Don't quote me on that. We got to see the official measurements of the combine. But him and Derek Moore from Michigan, they were going at each other all day. And at one point, there were actually punches thrown, and like it didn't get too out of hand, but there were some fisticuffs today. I'm sure you've seen it on socials. It was getting rowdy over there in the trenches today, and it was just a lot of fun. Um, I have to give a shout out too on the other side of the ball to Carver Willis, offensive lineman for University of Washington. As a Duck fan, that does kind of pain me to give credit where credit is due, but he was holding his own. He went up against Lee Hunter today on his own several times, held up well against him. He actually had a rep where he stonewalled TJ Parker, a guy who's also been having a really good couple of days, the guy who came into the season with Clemson as a potential top 5 pick. I'm not sure he's quite there, but I think he's been doing a lot to rehab his stock this week with his 2 practices. He's been running guys over. And I think Carver Willis, he's been playing all over. He was a tackle at UW, but he lined up today, both guard positions. He was trying to get some center reps in, but then the air horn blew and he couldn't get the center reps in. But I thought he was doing well. He didn't necessarily win every rep, but he was playing really solid today. I like the versatility. I'm a fan of guys who can play all along the line. I think he's a guy who might be a day 3 guy that you should keep an eye out for. Yeah. Anybody else standing out to you, at least in the trenches?
Zane Durant, the defensive lineman from Penn State, I think was really impressive today. In the little bit that we were able to watch, we kind of got a better angle than we did yesterday as far as getting to see the guys in the trenches. They tend to be, in the corner of the end zone on one side of the field or another. So kind of a hard place for us to access. But I thought we had some good, viewage today. And I thought Zane Durant was a guy that stuck out to me. Also, Dani Dennis Sutton had a pretty good day as well. Forgot to mention him. Penn State guys seem to be having a pretty good week overall, at least on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's a good segue into offensive guys who kind of stood out there. We mentioned the national guys. That offense didn't do much today, at least in the 11-on-11 drills against that defense, but they were stout, as we just talked about, for the last 20 minutes or so. So offensively, the guy that sticks out to me is Malachi Fields. I mean, because he made the best play of probably the week. Taylen Green, one of Ryan's guys, Arkansas quarterback, threw a 60-yard bomb to Malachi Fields, and he had to lay out to get it, but he showcased it all right there. And Malachi Fields, the Notre Dame wide receiver, was not used like that at Notre Dame, not used as a down-the-field guy. And it doesn't make sense because when you look at Malachi Fields, you're like, wow, this guy's really tall. He's 6'3", 6'4". Don't quote me on that. He's one of those two. But point being, he wasn't used as a downfield go up and get him guy. He was kind of used in short yardage, middle of the field, run after the catch, and he's good at that kind of stuff. But what he showcased today was his ability to, 1, go up and get it downfield, 2, separate down the field. Seemed like he is kind of putting it all together. I don't know. Big stock riser for me today was Malachi Fields because he made the biggest play of the day, biggest splash play of the week, probably. And I think he's had a couple of nice days.
Yeah. I would say that that ball that from Taylen Green, I wouldn't call Taylen Green one of my guys per se.
It is your guy.
In that I think he throws the prettiest ball here this week. I don't know
Yeah.
I don't know that that's like a ringing endorsement based on everything else we've been saying about quarterbacks. But I will say he uncorked one today. I think it had to be 50 air yards based on just the feel of what we were seeing. He ran, but it was he tracked it so well. Malachi Fields did. He had it over his shoulder. It was beyond his red basket. He had to kind of do a little dive for it and extend he has very long arms and he had to fully extend them as he kind of dived into a somersault almost. but you could see that he managed to kind of bring the ball in and protect it before he hit the ground. Uh, it was one of those where we're in the stands watching it, and you got a verbal like, oh, like ringing out throughout the stadium as everyone watched that come down. The offense got crazy. There wasn't a lot of celebrating for the offense where they showed a lot of emotion today, but that was one of them. Speaking of offense, one guy left in the trenches that I do want to mention, Brick House, that I was not aware of your game, sir. I am now officially intrigued. Auburn lineman Jeremiah Wright. Uh, he's a big guy. He had some of the most powerful blocks. I like he was unmoving, throwing guys to the ground. I'm gonna have to go watch some Auburn tape because I got myself intrigued. Other guys that we want to mention, I think there are at least a trio of wide receivers that you're probably not high on your radar coming into the week for most fans that I think of like I'm not telling you that they're going to be a team's like number one alpha receiver, but I've always kind of had a soft spot in my heart for the wide receiver twos and threes in the league, the guys who maybe aren't going to come out and dominate everybody, but kind of just find a way to have a nice little role in an offense. And there's three that have started to stand out over the last 2 days. One of them in the early practices is Josh Cameron, wide receiver Baylor. He's not necessarily out here just like dicing guys up with his routes, but he's had at least 2 to 3 impressive catches where he has to, get airborne or go through a guy or have a guy trying to come through him, and he just comes down with it. There was one today where I think he had to like jump up in the air and like catch it while there was a guy trying not to undercut him because again, we're not tackling. But like if it had been a game, he probably would have had his legs taken out from under him and flipped. But he came down with it, landed hard on the ground, kept control of the ball. Um, just seen him have a couple of plays towards the end zone where he has to go up and get it. Been really impressed with him. Cyrus Allen, Cincinnati. He's like I think he's going to be, a guy who probably plays slot. Maybe he plays a little bit of Z, but he's been dicing guys up just with his routes. He's got really some like sharp cuts. I think he's a guy where it's like you're not necessarily throwing him deep, but you are throwing him on those short, quick hitting routes. You know, if a team like the Steelers brings back one Aaron Rodgers or someone who has a similar style to him, could be someone that's intriguing because he's able to get open in the underneath quickly, and then he's able to kind of do something with it after you get it. And then lastly, another guy that I think is probably the most who is this guy out of nowhere guy for most fans and most guys that have been in the stands this week, Tyron Montgomery, Ty Montgomery, if you will, John Carroll receiver. Go to Twitter, search as Tyron Montgomery, watch him just run a slant and how he's leaving guys like in the dust. But he is somebody where like again, consider me intrigued. Consider me intrigued. He's been having a really strong 2 days with quarterbacks who aren't necessarily putting the ball in the most favorable of places, and yet he finds a way to come down with them. I think he's going to be a useful guy for somebody.
Yeah. And, Cyrus Allen from Cincinnati, a guy that we kind of wanted to mention. Ryan was telling me to watch him. Got to watch him a little bit more today. I was focusing on him more. Moves very well. I don't know how to explain it. You know how some guys just move different. Cyrus Allen is one of those guys. If you go to YouTube, type up Cyrus Allen, you'll see what we mean. He's just a very fluid guy in the way he moves, things like that. Consider me intrigued. Like Ryan said, wasn't familiar with his game, but consider me intrigued.
Like, have you ever had like a really poor internet connection where a guy's here and then it's almost like it glitches and he's over here? That's
Yep.
Cyrus Allen.
That makes sense. That's a good comparison. That really is. And then Jacoby Lane from USC. He's been a guy that, he's very popular. Another guy that was very popular at Media Day for good reason. I think he's a hell of a football player. I think he's been showcasing that this week. But he's a guy that I think a lot of people were high on coming into this week. A guy that I don't even know if I've had a chance to talk to you about, Kevin Coleman Jr. from Mizzou, number 3. We haven't talked about him really at all. He's been really impressive again. Much like Cyrus Allen, he's kind of like an undersized guy that is probably going to play slot, has the potential to play outside, but I think he's going to be more of a slot guy in the NFL. He's had a really couple of nice days. He's kind of gone under the radar because I feel like some other guys have been showing out a little bit more, but Kevin Coleman Jr., he's been a guy that I wasn't too familiar with his game coming into this week, but he's been a guy that I've been really excited to watch. I'm excited to see what he can do in the Senior Bowl, the actual game. Excited to see what he can do.
You touched on Jacoby Lane. I've been saying for a while, future Steeler. I don't know for sure if obviously they'll get to draft him. I think his popularity is growing as well. But like I keep thinking about like who's his comparison, and it's I think it's Martavis Bryant. I truly do.
I like that. If the Steelers can get another Martavis Bryant, let me tell you what, I certainly would not be upset whatsoever. But some other fun nuggets from Mobile that we did have today. Omar Khan, the Steelers general manager, not in attendance, which is a little bit weird, but I guess makes sense given the fact that Andy Weidel was there, and he's been the more talent evaluator of the two in the Steelers front office, the guy that kind of puts the draft board together. He's been credited with a lot of that over the years. So to see him there with a couple of Steelers scouts, I guess that makes sense. We'll see if Omar does show up for Thursday's practice or on Saturday. Also, Ryan and I were sitting directly behind, probably no farther than 7 feet from Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson. We didn't even realize it was Ty Simpson. It was very clearly just a guy in black sweatpants and a black puffer coat who did not want to be noticed he did not want to be seen. I'll tell you that.
But what we finally started, what tipped us off is we're sitting there, we see him in his, in retrospect, Alabama colored Nikes. But yeah, put it up. It wasn't even that cold yet. Put it up, had his face mostly obscured, had a hat on, had like a couple of like, I'm not sure if they were family. I'm not sure if they were like representation. I'm not sure, but he had people kind of like around him trying to like obscure him. And like, we didn't take much notice until we kept noticing just a trail of children walking up, and you'd hear like and they'd all have balls, and you're like, what? Who's this? And eventually, like he turned his face when talking to one of the kids, and we're like, oh, that's Ty Simpson. What are you doing here, man? We took the high road. We didn't want to like, well, maybe not the high road's not the right way to put it. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was there enjoying his time. He was just watching practices like a regular fan. I'm sure he probably had some talks with teams today, but we decided, you know what? He's obviously trying to be incognito. He's failing. There's other people harassing him, so we didn't want to go up and bother him. But he was there, and I do find that intriguing. If To go back to your earlier point, though, if we do want to put like a small tinfoil hat corner section on and talk about why Omar Khan is not there, other than obviously having a busy week with the new coach, him being the contract and cap guy, you think we're working on some contracts that we're trying to get off the books or trying to move forward? There's been a lot of whispers about guys who might not be coming back next year. I know a certain Patrick Queen has been posting cryptic tweets, like an hour, like a sand glass and things of that nature. Do you think Omar's kind of burning the midnight oil trying to figure out how he's moving this money around on this roster?
I don't know. I don't think something like that would prevent him from coming to Mobile. I do think it is weird though, because like I said, he's been there
I mean,
every
he's the
single year.
contract guy.
Yeah,
Weidel is the talent guy, and I think if you're worried about him getting a GM job elsewhere, I do think it speaks well for the Steelers that he was down here in a Steelers capacity. Um, I don't know. We've seen a couple Steelers scouts around. No, none of the no Mike McCarthy, no Omar, but Weidel we didn't lay eyes on, but we through the grapevine and through some of the Pittsburgh beat reporters talking mentioned that he was here, so I'm going to believe that he was. But you know, interesting times for sure in the next coming weeks for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm sure.
yeah, absolutely. And another fun little nugget. This has really nothing to do with the Senior Bowl, but Tommy DeVito's agent, I just looked it up. His name is Sean Stellato, and I think I've heard that before. He was there today. He's been there the last couple of days, and we've kind of been like, isn't that the Tommy Cutlets agent guy? It looks very Italian. You know what I'm talking about. If you just look up Tommy DeVito agent, you'll remember it from when he went viral when Tommy Cutlets was starting for the Giants way back when, like a year and a half ago. But his hat, his signature hat, he has 2 of them that he carries around with him all the time.
One
Why?
on his head, one that he's just carrying around in his hand. Maybe he needs to make a quick change. Maybe he just likes to have it as like you know, some sort of, I don't know why you would need to carry around a second hat all day, but he sure was.
I didn't get it. It was one of the more interesting things I saw today.
He had
And
on like a tan fedora. He's definitely a fedora guy. If you look this guy up, you'll know what we're talking about. He had a tan fedora on, and he was carrying around a black and white checkered one in his hand. Why? Who's to say? Who's he representing here? We don't know. We didn't see him with any players, but he was here.
he was here and in attendance and had several hats and probably a bag with several more hats, if I had to imagine. So, Ryan, any final guys that impressed you? Any guys that you kind of walked away from this and you're like, yeah, he looked pretty good, as we kind of wrap up here and look forward to the final day of Senior Bowl practice?
Just a couple more guys whose names writ down. For starters, I'm honestly surprised we got this far and we haven't mentioned Sam Roush, Stanford tight end. I
Was going
think
to
he's
mention
made
him. Yep.
I think he's made a lot of money over the last 2 days. I think people knew that he was a solid blocker. He looks like a prototypical tight end with his build. But where I think people didn't realize was one, the speed. He's not been the fastest tight end that they've been putting up on the big board for the clock times, but he is on the podium uh with those times. I think he was running something like I don't know, 14 miles per hour or something like that, which doesn't sound fast, but I think the top tight end was only running like a 16 or 17 mile per hour. So the fact that he was in the top five, that's of note. But he's just had smooth hands. And in a week where the quarterbacks aren't really going vertical and they're doing a lot of shallow routes, a lot of check downs, a lot of hitting the running backs and hitting the tight ends, he's really gotten a chance to show out. I think he has 117 career catches in college, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you do have to remember how Stanford's quarterback situation has not, let's say it's been comparable to the quarterback play this week. That's a good way of putting it. And so I think he's a guy who is going to get to the NFL and he's going to blossom. I'm not saying he's this guy, but just in terms of didn't produce a lot in college and then has the opportunity to produce a lot at the next level, like a George Kittle. I think that's kind of what we're talking about here with Sam Roush. So I'm curious to see where he goes, how high he goes, where he goes. But he's been a lot of fun. You already touched on Bud Clark. I wanted to give him a shout. Uh, and then a couple other guys. These aren't guys that I'm necessarily saying have like been catching my eye each and every rep they've taken, but they have had a couple nice ones. I'm increasingly growing intrigued by Vinny Anthony, wide receiver of Wisconsin. I think at worst, he's got a special teams role in the league. And he's had some couple of plays this week where he's shown off his ball tracking skills going downfield. So we haven't seen a lot of downfield throws, but he's coming down with a couple. So, he's a guy who I'm keeping an eye on. I think this is a classic day three guy. Maybe he's, a team's wide receiver four, but I think at least the special teams he's got a role. And then another guy who today really was just one rep that we saw that caught my eye, but it makes me want to go back and watch more was Xavier Sorey, linebacker of Arkansas. There was a play today where they hit, I don't remember even who the receiver or the pass catcher was, but they had a ball that they were catching out in front of them. They kind of bobbled a little bit. He was able to come in, rip it out, get the interception. Thought that was really impressive and just kind of want to see if he keeps showing up because, again, these linebackers, I'm telling you, strong class, strong class. They really were showing out today.
Absolutely. So, with that, I guess we will close out this episode. Like Ryan said at the beginning of the show, make sure to follow us over on Twitter for all kinds of player interviews during media day and after practice. Make sure to follow us for the best updates and coverage from Mobile. Very excited for day number 3 of practice to see who really stands out. But we had some big winners. We've had a lot of fun being down here for Behind the Steel Curtain. Shout out Behind the Steel Curtain and SB Nation for allowing us to come down here.
What's that handle, Joey?
At Steelers by Joey, and yours is at Ryan Parrish Media.
Correct.
Got it. All right. Thank you guys for listening,
subscribe,
watching.
Follow, share with your friends, share with your family.
Yeah, I couldn't have said any better myself. We'll see you guys same time, same place tomorrow right here on Trust the Board.